and get that going.
Maybe just
All
while
right.
you do that, Pete, would you mind start recording in? Or
I
just the
have
person?
started
Thanks.
recording.
All right. So yes, my name is Pete Behrens. I am going to share a story, not the Danske Bank story, but I'm going to share a story of an American insurance company, slightly smaller. And we can talk the difference of Danske and some of the things that are successful and not so successful. And that's true of any transformation. You provide a story, you present a side, but there's many sides, many stories, and that's okay. I'm not trying to say that everything's perfect. That's not my intent. I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado. We have had some record snowfall here, which has been awesome. And I know the Alps have not received much this year, so I feel sorry for those in Europe who love to ski. I heard that one of our resorts got over 300 inches already. Usually that's a March goal. Now we've already hit that in January. So good time to ski in Colorado if you want to come out. But I'm founder of the Agile Leadership Journey, and I want to share just a little bit about that and then go into a story with you. So the Agile Leadership Journey, a little bit like, understanding SAFe, understanding LESS, understanding Scrum, looking at all that ecosystem. One of the things I've come to find out over my career of coaching and helping organizations become more agile in some way, leaders become the ceiling. And so we attempt to get agility in there, and whatever we try, we hit that ceiling. So back in 2011, this was frustrating me. I'm a little bit aged in my consulting side, but I introduced a new curriculum that Jan is talking about that he found about 6 years later, and that's basically, what do leaders need to know to drive transformation? And that's what the Agile Leadership Journey is about. It's not about taking a framework, right? It's about the mindset and the culture to curate agility as values, right? Small a Agile, not big A framework. So we don't teach Scrum anymore. I used to be a certified Scrum trainer and coach. I don't do that, right? What I'm trying to do is inspire and educate leaders to help their organizations transform. And that's actually pretty rewarding. That's actually a lot of fun when they take on some of that responsibility. So that's who we are about. Now, just to kind of set some context, I want to share just a brief little story about my past, way past. So I grew up as an engineer, a software engineer. And my first job, right, I'm working with one of the big consulting firms at the time, and we're on an account. And it's going way south, right? We're spending 2 years writing documents, right? These are database documents and process documents and design documents and requirements documents. And I mean, you talk about, that concept of waterfall, like we were like that, like to the nth degree. We had shelves and shelves. This is, now I'm going to age myself, right? This is 1990s, right? So we had shelves and shelves of binders of requirements, kept redoing them. They kept buying new businesses. This was back in the heyday of mainframe redo systems. Well, it was going south. My point is, 3 of us who had no status, no leadership, no position inside this organization asked to try something different. We just simply tried to get a different way of thinking. And this included, at that point, rapid application development, some small talk, programming language that we could iterate on, right? Some fast feedback loops, right? This is before Agile's really born. We're in these days of JAD and RAD and cycles of just trying to iterate quickly. Well, come to find out, this group of 3 turned into 6, turned into 12, turned into, eventually we had over 300 people over the next 3 years take a seed and completely turn around this account, right? Now, was this account perfect to this client? No. But what we did is we provided value, right? And I think when you get down to the core of agility, that's what it means. It means deliver value. But my second point is, what is the power of a really small team that wants to make a difference? can make. And that's the story I want to share with you. But before I get there, I actually want to make this a bit interactive. So I'm actually going to encourage you, if you would, to actually grab your phone and do your little QR code snapshot of this thing and follow along, right? So you can just click on it and it should take you to this little presentation. Now, what's nice about this is you get to contribute to some of these slides, not all of them, but a few of them. So yeah, put the little love button there. So you can push that little heart and it sends a little heart, says, hey, I'm here. Now, you can also, if you want, there's a little comment button in the bottom corner. If you want to send a comment or a question, you can do that. But also, I know Jonas is looking at comments in Microsoft Teams here. So if you need to, whatever, right, send comments or chat. I'm okay with that. I actually enjoy that. Okay, so keep that live. Let me ask you actually a couple questions now. Here's first question. Since I'm an old Scrum trainer, I got to kind of get back to the core of Scrum. Which one of these is not one of the Scrum values? Which one of these is not one of the Scrum values? Yeah, I should probably hide results until everybody, we're going to have some bias. So there we go. We got a little different variation. Look at that. Okay. Good. I like some distributed thinkers. That's really good. So Jan, looks like we got some work to do on the Agile Aarhus here. We got to figure out what these, maybe it doesn't matter what the Scrum values are. Well, press enter to show correct answer. All right, here we are. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is transparency. Yes, it's a good value. I think transparency is a key to agility. It's not one of the Scrum values, but that's a little bit less important. Here's the second question. Of the 5 Scrum values, which I find to be incredibly valuable, and we're going to go through them here in just a second, which one would you suggest as your favorite? You can actually put multiple if you want. Do you have a favorite? So you can actually do a first, second, third if you want. I'm even following along too as well. Look at that. Focus. Focus taking the lead. Nobody wants respect. What is it about respect? Come on, that should be like number one. Like if we have respect, everything else should follow, shouldn't it? If we respect our time, we should be focused. If we respect, ourselves, we should be courageous. If we respect the work we're doing, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. The funny thing is, I'm going to put respect to the end too today. So I will follow you along. But interesting. So focus. All right, I like that. Focus and courage. I'm going to share a story with you of a company, Amerisure. I co-presented this with the CIO of Amerisure in the Business Agility Institute in New York City. He was up on stage with me. I've changed the story a little bit to present it to you solo here. I'm going to take us through these 4, and actually I'll add respect at the end. Walk you through how leveraging the values of Scrum can drive this process. So here we go. Let's start with courage, right? I mean, think about COVID, right? COVID was a great driver of change, right? They say it's probably one of the most significant impacts to digital transformation we've seen in, my lifetime, right? It's easy to act when you have no choice, right? COVID provided no choice. What's challenging, how do I change when things are good, right? This goes back to the whole good to great kind of metaphor, right? Good is the enemy of great. Amerisure leaders were really interesting here. Things were running well. This business was doing okay, yet they said, it doesn't feel right. Like we're feeling the fintech pressure, right? The finance tech pressure, the insure tech pressures that are coming, right? So they had a sense. Right now, it's also easier to hire a consulting firm, like, go ask Jan, bring us in, bring in the consulting firms like McKinsey and things. This organization said, hey, we need to take some ownership in this responsibility, right? So one of the things that we find is leadership teams that take their own responsibility. Now you can bring in education and help, but it creates a much better engagement because there's more ownership involved. It's not just handed off to another firm. Now, it's also easier to do things a little bit less risky, right? Take short, this is the way Jan started with Agile Leadership, right? Before it got put into the Agile transformation at Danske Bank, right? Amerisure decided to take a big swing. They actually went from the CEO, the C-suite, and the entire senior leadership team to say, let's think about this organizational wide, okay? And that's the story I want to share with you here today. And now it's easier to follow kind of the trended practices, the package, right? What we're seeing in the industry is people want a recipe. Give me the ingredients, give me the instructions. I'm going to cook the beautiful, beautiful meal. This is safe, right? This is the frameworks that we have today are the prepackaged ingredients, and they're not working, right? They're not creating the transformation that I think leaders are looking for and employees are also seeking in there. Okay. Amerisure leaders were open to something new, and that goes to our second point here, openness. Openness, what's interesting about openness is, well, I'll move on here. I'm going to cover that a little bit later. So think about this. No company hires somebody without having the skills and experience, right? That education to do that job. Yet every day, leaders are put in a position of leadership with zero education and experience in that role. Thanks for the heart, by the way. What we see all the time, right, is leaders get promoted to positions of status without having that. It's like, why do we do this? Like, this is almost insane, yet we're doing it every day in organizations. One of the things from the Business Agility Institute's survey said that leadership development is not a priority. That's true, right? What's the priority? Well, put in the framework, install the process, reorganize do a reorg. Developing leaders has not been a priority. In fact, one of the things that I've found is probably only 30%, that's 1/3 of leaders actually receive formal education, mentoring, coaching. That's by the Blanchard report. Pretty sad, right? So only about 1/3 of leaders are getting some sort of assistance in becoming better leaders. So think about what Amerisure is doing here, right? Here's a picture of the Amerisure leadership team. We've got 35 of the most senior leaders, the CEO, CIO, CTO, head of underwriting, claims, some of the business units, finance, operations, right? You're talking every aspect of the business. This isn't an IT thing. This isn't a tech thing. This isn't, a digital transformation. This is thinking about the organization in a new way, right? And I'll get into kind of what we focus on and what we do here in just a second. So again, it's not about leaders learning Agile frameworks, right? When I go out in the industry and I say, what is Agile leadership? Or what are we teaching leaders about Agile? It's usually saying, hey, here's Scrum, here's Kanban, here's Lean, here's Safe, right? Here's Scrum at Scale. We're trying to go the opposite direction. We're trying to say, what as a leader do you need to think and act to shape a culture that's going to enable those Agile ways of working to be more effective? That's what we're doing here, right? So this is a very personal journey. We called it, one of the pieces here is what's called leadership agility. That is, how as a leader do I develop? And what you're seeing here is 3 stages that we teach, that we taught at Danske Bank and many other organizations, where we're taking somebody and saying, as you develop as a leader, you're developing agility. So I'll give you an example of this. I was a development manager, right? And I was in charge of engineers. And I get promoted at some point into being a director, right? And as a director, I'm in charge of all sorts of different types of people. And what's interesting is as I get promoted to director, even though I'm responsible for testers and, user interface specialists and, designers, things like that, stuff I haven't done. What's interesting is inside of me, right, is still that expert. Now, all of a sudden, as a leader, I start to develop two ways of thinking. I start to think about, oh, I've got an expert way of thinking. I've got this new achiever way of thinking in terms of leadership. One of the things we help develop leaders recognize is as they develop as leaders, you can actually build agility in not only what you see, but how you act. And so the way we talk about agility is think about the dog, right? The dog and the squirrel, right? Squirrel, 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 right? It's running all around. That's a movement agility. It's not very smart. And that's where I see a lot of organizations, right? We have movement agility without creative agility, thinking agility. What we try to help leaders recognize is agile movement is one dimension. How we see the landscape and the decisions we make is a second. And so that's what we're trying to do is trying to help create, open the eyes of leaders to see things a little bit differently. So unless leaders are able to do their own transformation, we're not going to get the business transformation, right? So if our goal is that bottom right quadrant, value delivery, what we're saying is we need to shape that through leadership agility, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what happened here at Amerishare and how they're able to kind of transition this. So, and by the way, as we go through this, if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them out there. What we saw is, and we see this over and over again, Amerishare leaders were inspired to be agents of change themselves. They started to experiment with different ways of working. Now, you can experiment with a meeting, how I make a decision. We call that microculture change. Or you can start to experiment with a team and a process and a policy and a metric and some other levers, right? These are what we call macro culture changes. But none of this requires a framework, right? What we're doing is encouraging experimentation. Okay, so third one, focus. The biggest challenge I see with organizations is that they focus on the agility itself. I saw this a bit at Danske Bank, right? Agility almost became the goal, not, okay, what do we try to do as a business? Now, for Amerishare, what their goal was innovation. We need to be a more innovative organization. We need to be more creative as an organization. We're fine as an operational execution engine, but if we don't get more creative, we're not going to sustain, right? So when we talk to leaders, we say agile is a means, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here, right? Most of you recognize this, but I think it bears repeating to leaders. Agility is a competency. It's not a goal. Agility is a skill we have to develop as leaders. Thanks for the hearts. Appreciate that. So the leaders already knew their strengths and challenges. All we're doing is focusing them. So what does that look like? What that looks like is we can actually visualize change in an organization. What you're seeing here is what's called the values map. This is the Amerishare's values map. Now, what is this doing? This is simply differentiating where we are today and where we believe we need to be. Now, this wasn't totally revealing to leaders like, oh, duh, we need to be more creative, right? What was revealing to leaders was the visualizing it on a map. It gave them a bit of a North Star. But what also it revealed to leaders is what they have to let go of. In order to, being creative is one thing, but how do you be creative? Well, we've got to let go of some things that we're holding on to that are keeping us away from being creative. So for example, if we're afraid of failure, creativity is not really an option. right? If we're afraid of even making a mistake, not even failure, but even mistakes, or if we have to get it right the first time, right? All these things are going to get in our way. So what this was helpful for leaders is to see both sides of that dimension. Okay, now this is what we call organizational alignment. So when you think about power, right? I think about, okay, a human strength, right? A crew boat, right? Rowing a boat. How do you get speed? Well, you get speed by bulking up. I got more strength than you do on our team. But you also get speed by rowing together. So when I think about strength of an organization, most of organizational agility gets lost in the lack of alignment. And what Amerishare did really well, what organizations that succeed at transformation do really well, is they focus. And we had a North Star. And so what we were able to do is transition that to every individual and every leader and every initiative connected to that singular goal of more innovation, right? And that's what I find to be probably one of the most valuable. Focus is probably my most favorite value probably in these set is focus. Okay, so we started in 2018. In 2019, 1 year later, Amerishare earned its first innovation award. Now, okay, that's 1 year later. Obviously, they had internal leading indicators that things were changing, right? Culturally, they're changing the way they run meetings. They're changing the way they engage teams. They're changing the way they're making decisions. They're changing experimentation, failure, right? There's a lot of internal change. But what leaders need to see is they need to see the external validation of that change, right? And so for Amerishare, yes, innovating new products is one thing. But what's interesting is actually Amerishare got their first innovation award for their digital innovation practice. Look at that. They built a team to innovate. What does that remind you of, right? Scrum. If you want to do something, if you want to create value, build a team around it. Well, what did they do? They build a change team, an innovation team that is innovating on the practice of innovation. And they get an award for, I mean, it's very meta, right? But that's the engine. And that's one of the things that we help leaders do is if you have a goal, build a team around it. Scrum 101, right? Okay. So almost our final one here, commitment. And I think we're doing well on time. So we have time for questions and diving into some more fun topics once I get through this. All right. I put this in red because I think it's the hardest. I also put this in red and I put it last because it's the thing that comes at the end. It's not at the beginning. I think the beginning is about alignment. It's about courage. It's about openness to take a step and to try something different. Commitment to me, yeah, you can commit at the beginning, but commitment doesn't show up until year 2, until year 3, until year 4. That's commitment, right? You think about your spouse, right? Your kids. Are you committed to that relationship, right? That shows up after that 7-year itch, right? That's the kind of thing that we're thinking about with commitment. The biggest problem that leaders face basically is ADD, right? That attention deficit syndrome where let's go on to the next thing. Okay, Amerishare wasn't there. Amerishare didn't do that. Now, business transformations won't happen in a year, right? Amerishare wasn't transformed in that year. Nobody recognized that they were transformed. We didn't celebrate transformation. What we celebrate was a milestone. Victory, yeah, we had some innovation. We got an award. We're seeing signs. But what that means is we got to double down. Okay. Again, going back to the Business Agility Institute report, it takes 2 years on average to see the first stepwise improvement in business agility. That's a scary sentence. Some people are afraid to share that with leaders. I start my conversation with leaders with this. I want to scare leaders. You think about fitness and health. It's something that never ends, right? You can't just say, we're going to go to the gym this month, this week, this year, and we're done. You've got to change your eating. You've got to change your exercise. You've got to do that forever. So the second part of the sentence I don't include here is they said it takes 8 years to get 50% improvement in business agility, right? That's two presidential terms in the US, and that's too long for leaders to think about. But what I'm trying to set leaders up for is, if you do not reinvest, this will not happen. So it requires year-over-year investment. I look at this like investing in the market, like your retirement savings, your financial investments. How do you gain? How do you win? Certainly, there is once in a while you win the lottery, right? You hit the right stock. You do the right thing. Most investors win by reinvesting their dividends. You take your gains, you put them back in, and you keep on going. And then over the course of what we call marginal gains, right? Every year, maybe you earn a few percent here and there, maybe you lose a year, but overall, hopefully that continues to grow. That's what we're doing with transformation. So how do we know, right? I mean, if we're doing investment, we get feedback, right? We get, oh, the stock went up, it went down, your investments went here and here, and you review that once a year with your financial advisor or more. We did the same thing with Amerishare leaders. Year over year, we went back, we gathered data, and we looked to see at the shifts. Now, you might say, oh, this is just minor little shifts. They represent significant changes, right? So we're not snapshotting the whole organization. We're getting, a 15%, kind of snapshot of the organization to say, hey, how are we feeling about things? What you'll notice happen when we start to shape culture, two things. One is, and you notice both the culture shifts, but what's more interesting is the perception of the culture that's needed shifts. So think about this. When something's out of whack, when something's not aligned, what do you want? You want to swing the pendulum really far. When it starts to come back in alignment, you realize, oh, there is some value to being over here in control. Maybe we don't need to swing the pendulum quite so far. I don't feel as much pain anymore. So what you find, alignment comes in both directions. We shape the culture, but we're also shaping what's needed. And that's what's happening here on the control side, is both sides are coming together to create alignment. On the creative side, what's really fascinating about this is they're not letting go of the need for creativity, right? That's still getting pushed out there. But every year they're making progress. Every year they're feeling better about the culture and how it's translating towards innovation. So, dividends, reinvest your dividends every year. For Amerishare, here's what their kind of recognition looked like, right? Back in 2019, they got the digital innovation practice. In 2020, it was another innovation of their Agile practice group. So again, this was a specific team focused on some of the agility constructs on Scrum and how we're running teams and Kanban. And, they're kind of building Agile in their own way. They had an Agile practice group they got an innovation award for. And recognize, right, these are industry innovations. So this is the insurance technology saying, hey, that's cool, right? But what's interesting then is they made a pivot. These process innovations started to create product innovations. And that's what you're seeing in 2021 and 22 is product innovation, artificial intelligence, platforms, things they're building products on that are helping clients today. So does that mean they're perfect? No. What this means is leaders created a goal. We need to be more creative, innovative. They took some courage to take the step, right? Openness to teach leaders something new. The focus to focus everybody on that goal and the commitment to stick through it. That's really what we're seeing here, right? And finally, respect. I respect your time, so I'm not going to continue blah blah blahing. I want you to recognize my point of this story is not, most of you are not the CEO and don't have this control, and I know that. right? I know that you are not that person. That's not my point. My point actually, and this is true, by the way, if you can get the senior leadership team to do it, that's great. My point, though, goes back to my original story. Pete, at 27 years old, on a team of 3, in a system I had no leadership over, shaped culture. That's the story. Now, at the time, I had zero language to know what I was doing or to even shape it in this way. But looking back retrospectively, that's exactly what we did. We took these pre-Agile values, we brought them as a seed into an organization and snowballed that into a massive value chain. Any team with these values can create that kind of change, right? Any team at any level can shape this kind of culture. That's my point. Okay, it just so happens Amerisher had the senior leadership team, and so we could do things that were more business-wide. Okay, so let's join the discussion again. If you lost your website on your phone, otherwise just go back to that page. It should be back here. I'm just going to ask you a few questions, but I also want you to start thinking about questions, and let's open up this dialogue so we can have some Q&A and stuff like that. So here's a question for you. On this scale, how courageous are the leaders in your organization? How would you, oh, that's great. Try new things. I think my problem with my own leadership, I try too many new things sometimes. My team's like, Pete, stop trying to create new stuff. Let's just figure out the stuff we're already doing. All right, that's good. That's good. Okay, a few playing it safe coming in there. Right, a lot of this is about risk. One of the things I'll see is, you know, we sometimes wonder, why doesn't that senior leader act like Satya Nadella, right? Why doesn't that senior leader act like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, right? We have these models of these leaders. Recognize the higher you go up on that ladder, the farther it is to fall, the more risk there is. So to expect those senior leaders to take this is a really big gamble. And it's likely not going to happen. You don't see that very often. Now, it's great when you do, or it's at least interesting, maybe not always great. To be honest, I'm assuming you're somewhere in the middle of an organization. It's a lot safer and a lot easier to experiment inside the company. Be a catalyst bubble, right? Inside. You be courageous. You try something new. You shake things up. Okay, here's another one. How open are your leaders to learn? What we find is most leaders in most organizations, oh yeah, go learn Scrum. I'm fine over here, right? I don't see a lot of leaders going into classes as much as I think I would like to see them. Yeah, I suppose because most of you are here at the Agile Aarhus, you probably have fairly decent leaders and things like that. You might see this a little bit more in smaller companies than large. Showing signs. Yeah, I'll go to training next month. Next quarter. All right. How focused? All right. This is probably my most favorite one. How focused are your leaders? All right. There we go. Yep. Yeah. Completely focused is hard. I don't know. Maybe it's not possible. Yeah, I see a lot of, I think probably my number one that I see with leaders is the whip too high. Yep. Not surprising. Not surprising. All right, and last one here, and then let's go through some Q&A and let's talk about some things. How committed are they? This question's really about, yeah, their distraction level. how quickly they move on to the next thing. So Jan, do you mind if I talk and maybe contrast here Danske Bank? Is that okay? A little bit with this story?
I think that's totally fine. We've done that before and not been told not to. So
Okay.
no
And
problem there.
I mean, you're no longer. One of our guides is still with them, but and they're still working that way today, or they're still working on things today. But what's interesting is Danske Bank, if you're familiar with that story or have heard parts of that story, I mean, number one, what a huge ecosystem, right? 40,000 some employees all over, the map in terms of places and locations, right? Difficult system. But number two, a dynamic environment that was changing a lot in terms of things like even, right, the money laundering challenge that Danske Bank faced, right? So distraction coming from like stupid shit, right? And so if you're trying to stay focused on something, how that can just totally wipe you. And certainly COVID, other things. Now that came a little bit later with Danske. But the third piece I would say here, which was probably my most interesting that I found through Danske Bank Learning, yeah, when Jan created this program, it was an interest and people were excited to go to it. It was like, it was a draw. People were like, oh, I want this class. I heard so many good things about it. Let me go. Can I get in? And we couldn't run enough classes. And then the transformation team got a hold of it and they pushed everybody through it. And what was really interesting is the mindset shift that happened. And leaders were like, I was told to come to this class. What is it? And it was a whole different mindset of, I no longer had agency to choose this. I was being forced into it, and how that shifted. Now, a lot of leaders still got value from that workshop, but it was a totally different culture. So something to think about in terms of how change is pushed or pulled or, education and stuff. But that's just some of the things that I think, are interesting in that case. I don't know, Jan, whether you want to share anything there with that.
Not anything more than you done. So I agree. It's hard as you mentioned. This is about the same as starting exercising, eating healthy, etc., etc. It's no small task, and it takes commitment.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So just a little bit about who we are again and what we do. So by the way, I'll skip this slide. I'll come back to it here in just a second. We've got a bunch of people in our ecosystem. So Agile Leadership Journey is a community. It's like the Scrum Alliance or SAFe in the fact that we're gathering licensees that want to teach and coach this curriculum. Okay, and so we've got a few people in your area. I just pulled out some of our guides who are related to this group. I'm trying to get these two right here, Jan and Jonas, to join our troops. Some point they'll take the bait here. But Bent has a class coming up in May in Copenhagen. So just go to the website, Agile Leadership Journey, and you can find his class, sign up for it. Bent is awesome. I'm sure most of you know him. He's been a close friend and colleague for me for many, many years. But the other thing you recognize here, two of these people right in the middle, so Alan and Nis, both work internally. And we have that a lot. So probably about 20-25% of our guides are internal. They're not consultants. What they're doing is they're using the curriculum to teach and coach. So at Danske Bank, there's still more of a grassroots effort in teaching, coaching on Agile leadership. Alan uses it inside his financial organization. Tor in Norway, he is on the consulting side of the world, teaching, coaching. And a number of our guides do play like Bent on that teaching coaching side. But what they do, what we're teaching basically is the individual leadership, that's the left side here, and the organization, that's the right side. So I shared with you just a taste of each of those, right? That individual journey I can take as a leader, and the organizational journey we can take as a leadership team and organization. And then we've got 3 layers of depth, right? We have the education, we have these cohorts where you actually go practice, and then some 360s in coaching. So all that curriculum is kind of part of our ecosystem there. And then we have a podcast where I talk with the CIO here. This is more of a personal conversation with him about what it's like to be a CIO and driving change and things like that. And there is a, why isn't it switching? And then we gave a talk. So if you want to see this from the CIO's perspective, we shared a talk there with them. But let's open up for some Q&A. Yeah, don't be shy. Let's have some fun here. So questions. Can we let them talk too? Is that okay?
Absolutely. People are able to unmute. If you raise your hand, I will, Teams helps us, and I will call out your name. Please remember, just for your own, this is being recorded and is going to be shared afterwards. I hope that doesn't stop you from asking questions, but just so you are aware. Anna?
Yes, thank you, Pete, for a very insightful talk so far.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks. I really liked what you said about Agile being a skill that needs to be developed and practiced. And I got very curious on, how do you practice this skill, and how do you inspire others to see it as a skill that needs to be practiced and not, just a mindset or a framework kind of doing Agile sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of the benefits, I guess, of being an education and coaching organization is I feel like I get to practice. I get class every year, because one of the things we do in our guide community is we create an ecosystem of continuous learning and growth. And so one of the things we're doing is like book clubs and chats and master classes and bringing in external coaches. So kind of like you have here in your user group system, our Agile Leadership Journey guide kind of ecosystem includes a lot of that community. And then it also means sharing, how do we do things and stuff like that. So that's one thing that is a little bit easier for me, because it's kind of something that I'm doing. The other thing that, so just something I'm trying to help leaders understand. I did a podcast series, What Does a Leader Do, a few weeks ago. There was like 2 parts to it. One of the things I find leaders often do is when they shift from that I'm doing work to now that I'm leading work, we tend to just let go of the past. We tend to let go of the doing. And then I move into this coach. I see a lot of coaches. The coaches have let go of really kind of doing things anymore. And what I find is we create these hollow leaders that lose touch with reality. So one of the things we're trying to encourage leaders to do is find a blend. Even as a leader, there should be things you're doing, right? As a leader, certainly you want to be leading and then coaching. Like, what is my blend? For me, what that means sometimes is like speaking right now. I find having this Q&A and this feedback loop is really valuable for me to understand, what am I sharing? Is it hitting or not? If I teach or I coach still, because I'm running 2 different organizations, but yet I still want to teach and coach because it keeps me close to my customer. So what I try to practice is that, trying to find that blend. And then we're trying to do that with some of our guides, and then some of the leaders we work with, is always being curious about what you're doing, be more intentful and reflective on that. So yeah, it's a blend of things. Maybe I didn't answer that very well, but and then finally, podcasting. It's fascinating to do it, and I love listening, watching podcasts too. It's a great ecosystem. Well, do you? So was it Angie? Did I get that right?
Anna.
Anna. Oh, sorry,
Yes.
Anna.
You definitely gave some inspiration to it. I resonated with that shift of going from, from a previous kind of producing role into a coach role, for example, and so on. So it's also something about then having your new tasks, right, and trying to figure out how can you have an agile approach towards them, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and for me, it's just that we just actually released today. It's called, Lead Yourself First. And I think we forget sometimes, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of others. And so it's that self-care. It's not just fitness and health. It starts there, but it's learning. It's being a bit selfish on what am I doing? How am reflecting on myself, right? Reviewing what I'm doing, getting feedback, right? All those kind of self-care things. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
that.
sharing.
Sure. Thank you for joining today. Other
Maria,
questions?
did you have a hand up?
Yes, sorry. Unfortunately, I can't have my camera on, but yeah, thank you, Pete, for this very inspiring talk. I have a question about, for example, I have a client who wants me to assess how mature the organization is for implementing DevOps. So I get access to, the teams, and there's a lot of they talk about tools and the technical side of stuff, and I'm having I'm trying to figure out how I can make leadership, the management, see that their involvement is crucial, with the mindset and so on. That it's not just about implementing a framework and we're good. So do you have any tips on on how to make them more hands-on and understand their role in all of this?
Yeah. Great question. It's interesting because in my career as a coach and a trainer, right, the concept of assessment comes up all the time, right? Barometers, measures of effectiveness and health. And over the course of my career, I've developed many different ways to assess and tools, and I've used a number of them. And one of the things I realized is there's a lot of good assessment tools out there. I think the Agility Health Radar is a good one. So one of our partners, the Business Agility Institute, has developed a new profile. What's interesting is they've developed these 84 kind of competencies that all shape business agility. And obviously, it has a high degree of leadership characteristic in there. What I would recommend to you is whatever assessment you choose or you make on your own, make sure it has a component of leadership. So if you pick even like Agility Health Radar, I know you can choose modules and say, well, DevOps module, but let's also choose the leadership module. And what hopefully that will do is shine a light on, hey, okay, DevOps is okay, but look at this leadership thing. But what I find though is if the pain isn't there, nothing's going to change. The pain has to get exposed. So I can share with you a picture, and I'm going to take this outside of the presentation. But let me just share a picture with you. If I can get it up quickly, I should have had this ready to go. Hold on one second. Yeah, here's a picture. Share. Oh, stop sharing that and start sharing this one. Share. Okay. So what I want to share with you is just another, come on, mouse. Okay, there it is. Share a picture. Okay. Do you see that picture of the culture map?
Yes.
Okay. This was an interesting cultural survey. So what it doesn't do is say, we're good at tech ops, we're good at DevOps, we're good at Agile. What it says is, how are the values being lived out today? And what was interesting is, like the story I told today, there was a clear alignment. We have too much control and we need to be more innovative, right? That was clear in this organization. What wasn't clear is this yellow and blue quadrant, what we call the collaborate and the create. So here's what was going on. Leaders said, hey, we have a collaborative culture. The employees are saying, hell no, right? You just tell us what to do and it's like, oh, go, go, go. You got to get it done. Pressure on the budget, pressure on the time, pressure on the delivery, right? Just go get it done. That's compete. And leaders are like, wait a second, but we talk all the time. We collaborate. And what they realized is, yes, leaders collaborate, But once decisions get made, boom, it gets pushed into the organization and everything's go, go, go. What's really fascinating about this, and what I love about focusing on culture and values, is it lets leaders get involved without getting into the nuts and bolts of the technical practices and things like that. So while you could do a DevOps assessment, I might consider blending with that a little bit more like the concept of how are we living out our values and are we aligned as an organization? Because this was an aha to the leadership team, that then over the course of 18 months, they were able to say, oh, how do we get people more involved in decision making? How do we get people more involved in, like, if we want to update DevOps, how should that decision get made? All those things help them through that change process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer. It will be
Yeah.
very helpful for me.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have something like 4 minutes left, so we have time for a short question more, I would say, if we have any. Yeah, Son?
Yes, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I'm curious about the measurements you just put up. How do you convince leaders that you can only have a sum of 100?
We prepare them,
especially in big organizations.
It is a yeah. So the what Sam's referring to is the competing. Is the competing values framework. Okay, now this is a tool that's been around for about 30 years. It's not one we invented. And we actually pride ourselves on leveraging well-researched models. So all models are wrong. Some are useful. So there are many people who get frustrated. Don't force me to decide this one or this one, right? We get that. We try to prepare leaders to recognize the value in doing that. And when we prepare leaders to recognize everything's a trade-off, everything is a trade-off. And we tend to find, in fact, I just did this. So we're working with one of the largest global supply chain companies in the world, 180,000 employees. And we're doing a culture survey right now with their senior level leaders, their VPs, their directors, all across those regions and all global. And what we're hearing back from them is they said, thank you, I really like this. It forces us to decide. So you're right, for some it's frustrating. If we prepare them right and put the right mindset in why we're doing it this way and what this is about and what this can do for you, we can tweak that a little bit. But like I say, no tool is perfect. I try not to get too hung up on the numbers here. What I'm trying to do is get trends, and I work with leaders on that. Hey, all we're looking at is trends. This is all just perception, right? None of this is real, but let's see if it's useful. And what I use, just like a user story, it starts a conversation. That's all I want to do, start a conversation. So yeah, happy to talk more and more specifics on that, Soren, but yeah, it is as any tool has its pros and cons.
Thanks.
So thank you very much, Pete, for as always a wonderful presentation. And thank you for all the participants, because without you, we wouldn't have anything to present, or we would, but it was kind of silly. As I said, the recording will be shared afterwards. The link will be shared in the meetup group, and we will also share the presentation from this session. That's
super.
That's a wrap.
Thank you, team,
much
for hosting, and thanks everybody for showing up.
Thanks for a great session.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day, guys.
Bye-bye.